Welcome to today's episode of Expert Showcase. Today on the show we have Matt Mawhinney, and he's going to be talking to you and teaching and showing you all about podcasting and about personal service and how personal service in the podcasting business saves podcasters, that means you, time and energy. Hey Matt, how you doing today?
Very good, Chris. Thanks for having me on. Very happy to be here.
Oh, epic. We're so psyched to have you on, folks. I mean, Matt is an epic guy, as you should come to expect from guests on Expert Showcase. He's an epic guy. He's all about assisting people with podcasts. And the reason I wanted to get him on the show today is because you as experts, you as coaches and authors and speakers watching our show. If you aren't in podcasting, you probably will be. And if you are, you probably know how much time and what a struggle it is to get a lot of stuff done on the back end. Well, Matt is an expert in this particular field. He is an epic expert in this particular field. If you're brand new to podcasting, you definitely got to stick around. He's going to give you some great information on what you need to look out for. And if you're experienced in podcasting, you definitely need to stick around, because what he's going to tell you in the second half is going to resonate with you, and you're going to realize why you might need some help and might need somebody to take the load off, if you will, in some of these cases. But before we get to that, Matt, as we do with every guest, we want to get into your hero's journey. Our audience loves to hear about the beginning, the turning point, and the aftermath of all of our guests. So just give us a quick summary of your hero's journey. What led you from where you were before, to where you are now?
Well, Chris, I'm coming from the corporate world, actually. I was in sales and marketing for a number of years, and about a year ago now, I got to see my twin brother has a daily podcast for coaches, and I got to see, that was kind of my introduction to podcasting. I listened to a few of other subjects and started to learn a bit about it, and then I actually said, whoa, my brother's starting up his own show, and I could see him constructing his sound booth and could see him working away on editing software. So I was kind of watching from a distance, but for as long as I can remember, I've been into personal development and kind of checking out what some coaches are doing and seeing what my brother is doing with his own business. So this was something that was kind of floating around, saying, I wish I could be involved, but other than days like today, I'm usually not really in front of the scene. So I see my brother doing this, but I also got to see how many hours he was spending on his podcast, and it was his baby, but oof, his baby was taking him a lot every day. I mean, we'll talk a little bit further about the amount of tasks involved, but I just knew that I had to be, I think, part of get into this podcasting, and I've seen it go on the rise. I read some articles, so it really didn't come to a head till probably earlier in 2015 with my job. I'd seen a couple of rounds of layoffs. I had survived them, but I could definitely go with my intuition, see that there's some changes in the industry that I was in, in the sales industry. And yeah, one day my brother mentioned he was looking to hire out, and I said, hey, let me play around with the software and do, thinking I might do it on the side and gradually work into doing it full time. So I started doing his daily show, and then lo and behold, he started kind of getting some people saying, hey, who does your podcast? Or, and the referral thing happened, and a couple other people said they'd sign on. And I've always been kind of an all-in guy. I said, you know what, I'm going to go with my gut. I want to jump onto this podcasting wave, and this is a good way to do it. So I decided to start my company and do it full-time. And that's a little bit about my hero's journey. Like I say, I get paid to do personal development all day long, which I would be doing anyways on my breaks and in the mornings by reading. Now I get my personal development by listening to motivational content from content providers, across the globe. So that's a little bit about my journey.
Man, Matt, that is epic. And for those of you who might remember the last name Mawhinney, yeah, we had his brother on the show back many, many moons ago. We're going to have to get your brother back on here again and get a follow-up, because he also was such an epic guest. So actually, we should get you both on the screen, and then I'll flip-flop your names all day long, and people will have a fun time. Yeah, exactly. Epic. So let's dive deeper. First, let's start off with the beginning, because it's interesting to me that you were We talked offline, and you were fairly successful in the industry you were in. As you had just said to our audience, you just kind of said you just kind of saw the writing on the wall. Is that correct?
I think you're right. I really enjoyed sales, and it was financially was good to me. That's why I enjoyed sales, because you have the potential to make more and get paid what you're worth. But changes in the industry, it was a traditional industry. I appreciated the opportunity, but when you just have a kind of, I guess, an intuition or a gut. Something was telling me, and part of it I have to give credit to Gary Vaynerchuk's Crush It. Read that book, even though it's from '08, '09. You read that book, you want to get a brand going online and jump into the online world. So, I'm pretty adaptable to change, and thought, what, I might as well take a shot. But I had some great coworkers and a great boss over at my other place, but I just knew it was time to jump and cut the cord and go out on my own.
Yeah, epic. So, was there something that because I'm sure there's a lot of people like you listening and watching to us at this point where they're successful and they're learning from you because they're here to hear from experts and they're starting to question going, well, wait a minute, things are successful for me. Should I start to change? Can you remember, was there anything during that phase that gave you a signal or made you even start to consider something else?
Yeah, about a year ago, there wouldn't have even been the possibility that I would have left that job, which came about pretty quick. But what happened, to be quite honest, was significant changes to the compensation plan. I really, if there's a if and that's the I understand that in the corporate world, you're at the mercy of the corporation. They're trying to make themselves as lean as possible. But when there's changes, and I'm pretty good at math, I could do the math, and when I could see the changes coming, it probably would have been a hit to about 40% of my gross, which at that point I figured that's a kind of a catalyst to push me out. But no, I wasn't looking to change at all until those changes got announced, and that kind of gave me that push that I really, I guess, needed to look to do something different. And I decided to hedge my bets on myself.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You also talked about you talked about one of your comments was that um, you were doing personal growth and personal development all day anyway, and now you're kind of getting paid to do it. So when you
Yeah.
were a success, one of the qualities of you being successful was to continually investing in yourself and continuing to grow and develop yourself, your skills personally and professionally, right?
You're absolutely right, and that's something probably the last 10 years that I've done daily reading, and I think you've probably heard Think and Grow Rich a million times across your journeys, but that's a book that my brother introduced to me, and there's so many books I can't even really probably cut it down to a list of 10 by mentioning Gary Vaynerchuk's. There's some great books on I think the best book I could recommend to anyone is Who Moved My Cheese by Spencer Johnson, for a
Yeah.
change. That after you read that book, it just shows that whether it's a job, whether it's marriage or anything, the cheese could move at any time, and you have to be ready to adapt. So I'm kind of, like I said, I've been adaptable, and I've used kind of personal development's been big for me. I've always been big into the gym, and I think health and a positive thinking goes a long way. And I'll be the first to admit, the last couple of months at my corporate job, I wasn't the same. I just, when the changes were announced, I just was dragging myself in. I didn't have that zest, and when you lose that, then I think it's time to make that move, and time to move on.
Yeah, and I think that's so interesting because really that's what leads us towards a turning point and leads us towards recognizing that there's a turning point when we start to lose that zest and we start to lose that desire to do what we're doing. It's kind of, you're still successful, but you kind of know or feel that something is off or just isn't right because for you, if I understand things correctly, you were always, before that, you were excited to go in. I mean, it was something that you enjoyed doing, something that you had fun doing, right?
Yeah, I was in the office early every morning, sometimes 7 o'clock, and I've always been the type, I don't mind answering my phone at night or doing work to look after a client. I took a lot of pride in the work I did, with all experiences, I take it. I really appreciate any experience I've ever had because it's always led or leads you right to the point you're at now. Who knows? Maybe I'd be a different person without the sales experiences that I learned in my last position, or the whole way through. I guess you're always picking up different things that help you develop, and I think it's important. One quote that always stuck with me, and I don't know if this is word for word, but Jack Canfield's "Everything you've ever wanted is on the other side of fear," I think is how it goes. And I always thought about that. Fear is almost this wall. If you could just somehow look over it, look around it, whatever, make the leap, and you'll land on your feet. I haven't starved yet. I take life not so serious, and going back to the Who Moved My Cheese book, you have to look at life is always changing, and you do have to be able to adapt.
Yeah, I mean, life is going to change whether we like it or not, and things are going to change around us whether we like it or not. And like you said, you have to adapt. So
Mhm.
before we get into and really dig into the turnaround, because what I'd like to do in a moment is dig into that turnaround and go through some of the feelings and some of the things you started to do and some of the actions you took and kind of how you prepared yourself for success. From the beginning, was there any is there any big moment or aha or anything that comes to you from your time before your turnaround that you'd want to share with the audience?
I think looking back at it now, I remember when those changes were announced by the corporation, you feel a little bit resentful, and I think the biggest thing to remember now, looking back on it, is to say, hey, look, everything does happen for a reason. So it just goes back to being adaptable, but be ready to change. And I think that aha moment was, you know what, I'm nobody owes me a good living for the rest of my life. And if you're going to rely on other people or companies, then you have to expect that some changes are going to happen. And I don't want to knock the 9 to 5 because I've done it for a number of years after university. But I think just for myself personally, I realized that I wanted to strike out on my own. It was this something that was always kind of there, but then there's always that fear, oh, I'm not going to get my paycheck every 2 weeks and things like that. And it's not for everybody. I wouldn't recommend entrepreneurship sometimes for the faint of heart, but I think if you're willing to work and you're willing to keep a positive attitude and treat people right, things will work out well. So I think the aha moment really is just what we've been talking about. I think realizing, like, when that what, nobody owes me anything, and what, I did enjoyed the position for a couple of years, but things are kind of constantly changing, and forces are moving. They've pushed me to kind of get into podcasting and get into something that's a really, really cool industry and a niche, and something that, as you know, that's on the upwards trend now. And I thought now was a good time to get on kind of on the wave. And who knows, maybe I'll start up my own show. It's someday, but it's addictive just listening to it and seeing what people are doing. It really is.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting because that leads us into, of course, the turning point and how you handled it. We really heard that turning point and that seminal moment, I think, it sounds like it came when you figured out. It wasn't really the first moment when they announced everything. It was kind of, it's almost like kind of you hear the news announcement and then you go back and you actually dig deeper into it and go, yeah, I best start changing like quick.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so you got this announcement, and I'm quite sure a lot of our viewers are going through this where they've heard something changing at their company or they heard something is going to happen. For you, when you heard this change was coming, do you remember the first thing you went and did after you heard about heard about the change initially?
Yeah, I grabbed my calculator and I saw what was going to happen to my pay and felt like I was on the Titanic and I wasn't going to sit around and listen to the guy playing the violin. I was going to try to find a life raft. And, everyone has choices to make, but I just knew that for me personally in my situation, I had to make the move. So the first thing literally that I did was grab my calculator, get my head wrapped around this new compensation plan, and in fairness, most corporations aren't going to make a change to a compensation plan for sales and marketing to give them more money and the company less. You know, they may be spun that way, but that's not what happens. But what I did was afterwards, I'm lucky. I have a very supportive girlfriend, and she's behind me 100%. And talked to her that evening. It was pretty quick when I made the final decision, and it was the next day. I had a great boss there. He was A1, and you know, sat down, talked to him, but I knew I was, you know, done, and passed my, you know, notice in. But I guess I should say it took probably 3 or 4 days, because I talked to my brother and kind of got my head wrapped around podcasting as well. So that's kind of, I guess, kind of how it happened.
So I think there's a lot of gold in there. So first, forget about the situation, folks. First, Matt went out and figured out how a change was going to affect him. I mean, so many times, and Matt, you know, you hear a lot of personal growth and development coaches, you know, a lot of coaches that you're doing shows for and editing shows for. I'm quite sure that a lot of them have the stories of their clients who sit around and either fail because of analysis paralysis, or fail because they stick their head in the sand, or fail because of, you know, 100 other different reasons, and not taking action is probably the big thing. So you know, so the first thing you did was you took action. You said, how is this change going to affect me? Because let's face it, it may have affected you seriously, which it did, but you know, other changes for other people might not affect them so seriously. So then when you found that it was going to affect you seriously, I love what you did next. You had conversations with people close to you. Let's touch on that real quick, because I know you have a supportive brother, and I know you talked about your girlfriend being very supportive. Tell us a little bit more. Like, when you approach them, you know, how did you approach the conversation, and you know, did they give you advice, or kind of what happened there?
Well, you know, my brother, he's a serial entrepreneur. He's the definition of entrepreneur, but it's very motivating to get to see that. And you know, we're twins, so we shared a womb. I don't know if that rubbed off on me early on. So, you know, he's gonna 99, well, 100 times out of 100, he'll tell you to go for it and go for your dreams. And then on the flip side, my girlfriend was kind of going through a similar change, where she was in a working for someone else, but also planning to open up her own business, which just actually opened this week. So I'm kind of lucky that way, where the two people that are the closest to me are both entrepreneurs who understand what it takes to be a successful entrepreneur. My girlfriend doesn't mind if I'm on my laptop, you know, till 11, 12 o'clock at night, because I'm, you know, need to get something in for the next day. It's really takes a special breed of people, as you know, for entrepreneurs, and it's not for everyone. I guess going back to I should have mentioned back to my coworkers, like, and the reason a lot of them are still there too is because I'm in a different situation. I don't have children and things like that. So, you know, there's still benefits that they would have to, you know, that obviously could, you know, help them out in their situation. And so for me, a choice really affects me, but everyone's got to look at their own personal situation, and whether it be, you know, staying in a job that you're in or trying on your own. I guess it's not a decision to take lightly, but at the same time, I think you're right. You have to, if you know it's the time to jump, and you'll figure things out on the way down. So.
Yeah, well, and the other key is that you had support. You know, you had support around you, and the decision you made was the best for yourself and for your current situation. Then the third thing, after finding you had that support, I did find interesting. You said you didn't go in and quit right away, or I said you didn't go in and give your notice right away, but you started doing some research. So for you, it was on podcasting, but in general, you know, it sounds like another good step is to, even though you trust that things are going to work out okay, it's like verify and start to do a little bit of research, to make sure that what you think might work at least has a chance. I mean, is that what you did, or did you dig deeper into
Yeah.
your research, or?
No, I'll be completely honest with you. My first thought was, I was in outside sales, territory management. My first thought was to look into sell a product for a different company and see. But looking at the job market, I felt for me that it wasn't quite what it would have been even, say, 8, 9 years ago. So for me, I looked and I said it was almost, that was everything was pushing me towards doing this. Like, if there was a ton of high-paying jobs locally that I think it would be tempting. And I've been contacted since I've been started up the company about some interviews and some people through different like LinkedIn, and I just had to say no. I'm in this, started something up, and I'm in this for the long haul. So I think it wasn't that I just said, okay, I'm going to quit and I believe in podcasting. There's a little bit of doing research for a couple days and then saying, well, I don't feel the job market's where it's at, and I think I want to get on something that's trending upwards, and I'm going to, the world's changing, you hear it, the industrial age, and now you've probably seen so many changes the last, really since social media, online businesses. There's a world of opportunity out there, and I think people are selling themselves short if they think they have to do a traditional job and not explore non-traditional things. Of course, my parents and such are old school. They probably think my brother and I are nuts, but it's and it all goes down to what you're putting in your head. If you're listening to podcasts that are motivational and people that are out there doing it, and you're reading about the Gary Vaynerchuks, and and you're filling your head with Napoleon Hill, then it's pretty hard not to take a bet on yourself for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I tell you, as our audience knows, I got divorced a couple years ago, and she says it's a couple years now. Amazing how time flies. But I know my ex-wife and her family were in the old mode, because it was kind of like, look, eventually it got to the point, look, shut the business down and get a real job. And the funny part is, anytime somebody who's not an entrepreneur or who doesn't realize what we do and what we go through says their real job, it's like it kind of makes me twitch and cringe, because I don't know what can be more real than end up working 80, 90 hours a week, or what have you, or working at all hours of the day or night. Just because it's not in an office or just because it's not in a factory doesn't mean it's not challenging. So
Great point.
it's interesting, because that really leads us now into the aftermath, which you got this, to kind of recap, if our users are just if our users, we have users, man. I'm not even going to go down there, but yeah, if you're a viewer of the show, you're a user. No, just off the rails. We'll rein it back in. Our viewers, if our viewers have just joined us, we've gone through so far how Matt was very successful in a different industry, realized that there was a change at the job he had there. As us people in the industry like to say, the just over broke job that he had there, and realized that he could do something else with a passion and with some stuff that he was already doing just because he loved it. But then he took the steps. He went out and realized how this change was going to affect him. He had conversations with people close to him, and then he did the research to figure out exactly if this was if this was something that was viable, and he found that it was. So then we get to the aftermath, which is where he's at now, which is successfully helping podcasters really, streamline their shows and everything. At least that's the way I'll describe it. Matt can describe it for you differently later. So after the turning point, I'm sure it wasn't all as we like to joke around, roses, daisies, and ponies with rainbows at first. To start making this happen, what did you start to do?
Sure. Well, you're absolutely right. You don't just quit a job and then start up a company and have zero startup cost and have a full roster of clients and only work 2 days a week and spend the rest of the time on the beach. There's that transition time, and I had banked on, for 4 or 5 months to make the transition. And no, it's growing at a good pace. I can't say. I'm doing everything myself, so it's kind of a nice way to do it, grow it organically. All of my businesses really come from referrals, and I've my Facebook list has doubled just in the last couple months, and it's been mostly due to connecting with people like yourself and people in the motivational industries and podcasters. And yeah, it's growing at a good pace. I'm really happy with the clients that I'm working with. They're people that I enjoy working with. They have really good content, and they're all really different, which is good. I mean, not to knock my brother's show, but if I was doing just his content, nonstop, I would, you like to have it changed up a bit. So I've got clients that are female hosts, clients that are male hosts, some that are in business, some that are in relationship podcast, and it's at a really good pace because it's not so overwhelming that I lose a handle on the quality. I can keep I'm a disciplined guy. I'm very scheduled. I keep on top of things. I have a backup that can help me out if I ever do pick up a big job and need the help. So it's I can't say enough of the first, it was just earlier this year, really, within the last 4 months that I've been doing this full time. So
Yeah,
I'm
but
very happy.
epic, and I think our audience though can tell, even from the turning point. If you didn't watch it, you got to go back and watch it. Even from just the turning point, the fact most people would have taken a week just to figure out if the change would affect them. I mean, you took an hour.
Oh
I
no.
mean, it was almost immediate. But that to me seems like your personality and what's making you successful. So you take action. You look at something and you take action right away, and you go, okay, what do I got to do? So within 3 or 4 days, you would accomplish something that most people probably would have waited a month to, and by the time they were done, might have been too late. Um,
Yeah.
so the other thing I find interesting is you're building the business, I say the right way, which is you're building it organically, but you're creating what we like to call minimum viable product. You went out and you tested first to see if this was even going to fly, before taking on thousands and thousands of clients. So let me ask you this: was that a conscious decision where you said, "Look, I want to make sure the quality is good. I want to make sure I get the procedure down. I want to make sure all this works right before I bring on too many clients and before I hire people and upscale." Was that a conscious decision, or was it something that just came naturally to you, or was it something that you just kind of stumbled into? Which is it?
A little bit of both. I think you're right. It's you only get one chance when you're starting out a company, and my marketing budget isn't thousands and thousands of dollars a month. Eventually, maybe I can try some other things, but I really right out of the gate, the biggest thing was connecting with people and just letting people know what I could do and let the pieces fall in where they may. And yeah, I mean, having a good source of business from different people referring me definitely helped out. But it wasn't, I mean, just to introduce myself, and I probably had 150 Skype calls, just to like with yourself, in the first, I'm going to say in the first 2 months, maybe month and a half, like it was quite a bit, or Facebook conversations, and just to kind of at least get my name out there. And if anyone ever needs a hand, they know who I am. And I'm not a overly pushy, sales guy. I'd like to, but if people know what I do and see that I can do good work, then if they're ever stuck and they know where to turn. But really, I would like to say, I think everybody would love to have starting out $10,000 a month to throw into marketing and really get out there and get into the funnels and all that. But I just didn't have, for me, I didn't have that sort of money behind me, and it was a matter of really just necessity, I would think, is how it grew and how it's been growing.
Yeah, that is epic, and I love how you said you had 150 calls within the first month and a half. Now, folks, I get it. Matt, used to do sales, and it's quote unquote easier for him to make those calls. And believe me, I've been on both sides, and I despise cold calling and everything. If you're like that, then you have to find a way to generate that business, whether it's Facebook, whether it's LinkedIn, something where maybe you're not picking up the phone, but you're generating that interest. Because the worst thing you can do is leave a job and create a business that will only ever make $5 a month. That's kind of the worst thing, because then you left something safe and you went to something that is surely going to fail. And how do you know if it's only going to make $5 a month? You create a product, you get your name out there, and you see what response there is. I mean, if you're taking 150 calls in the span of about 6 weeks, I would think there's some need for that particular product. I mean, that to me sounds like a good validation that there was a need out there. Does
Yeah,
that?
for sure.
Yeah.
No, you're right. I mean, I think having, people referring me, that was a good start, because I have my brother as a client, and then he has a podcasting course, so a few people that are starting out, I was able to help them out. So it wasn't all cold calls. I guess it'd be warm introductions, but a lot of people are maybe even just kicking around the idea, and they may start up a show a year down the road, or maybe they start up a show and they need somebody just to do a part of something that they really don't like doing, show notes or something like that, or maybe they just have a question about the editing software, and at least I can help them out that way, or promote their products as well. I like I say, I don't want to just sell. I like doing what I can, sharing around for people. And I think this sort of industry, podcasting, coaching, it's a real. Now I might be jinxing myself. I haven't met a bad. I was talking to somebody about this the other day, or he mentioned it to me. He's never met a mean podcaster or coach. Like, they'll jump to help you. So I think that makes it a lot easier if you're selling a product that's, I don't want to single out any industries, but if it's a bit of a tough sell, I think there's a little bit more apprehension to make that call. But for what I'm doing, I get to listen into someone's show and then give them a call and say, hey, I liked your episode, or something like that. So it's it's a neat industry that way. It's very, very positive from what I've seen, and it goes well if you're trying to sell a product or a service. So.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Matt, you've had an incredible hero's journey. We're going to wrap up the hero's journey piece of our episode today. We're going to take a 60-second break, and when we come back, we're going to dive right into the expert focus segment. And for those of you new podcasters, Matt's going to give you some tips and tricks, and let you understand what you're in for. And for those experienced podcasters, through the information Matt's going to share, you're going to realize he understands you, he gets you, and he's on your side, and he's the one that you should be having help you save your time and energy. So give us about 60 seconds, and we'll be right back. Are you a coach, an author, or a speaker who wants your very own web TV show just like Expert Showcase, only with all your branding around it? Then what you want to do is head on over to VideoContent.Agency, go up to the Work With Us tab, send us your information, let's start a conversation, let's see if we can develop a program around you and your message. And until we see you there, make it an epic day. And we're back. Oh, Matt, this has been great so far, and I say so far because it's going to be even better going forward. It's been great, but now it'll be epic or something like that. It's always epic. Anyway, so I don't derail us anymore. Here was what we're going to do. We're going to jump into the expert focus segment, and this segment's all going to be about podcasting and for podcasters, and some information to help all the podcasting community out and all of our viewers out. The tagline is personal service, saving podcasters time and energy, because we know podcasters spend a lot of time and energy in their doing their craft, so to speak. Give us a quick overview of what we're going to be talking about, and then I'll give the folks the 3 bullet points, and we'll dive right in.
Yeah, well, when we did our pre-chat, I guess I thought of the 3 keys to success what I would want to know if I was looking to start up a show. So the things I'd like to touch on, first of all, understanding how much work goes into producing your own podcast. Another key point that I see is the importance of being consistent. And then finally, the having quality, looking at quality, not just price, I suppose, and when you're looking at options on producing your show.
Epic. So you did that summary so well, and gave the folks those 3 bullet points. We're going to go ahead and dive right into the first one, which it's all good, man. It's epic. It's good. You said you wanted your own show. You're just taking over my job. That's fine. Yeah. Not a problem. So let's dive right in. As far as how much work is involved, how much work is involved in doing and running and all the fun stuff around podcasting?
Okay, if someone's listening, if there's one thing you could take from this, if you think you're going to start up a weekly show and spend 2 hours a week or an hour a week on everything, I hate to burst someone's bubble, but it's probably not going to happen. There is a fair amount of work that goes in. Now there's a big reward too. You get you're putting out your message to the world. So that's where I'm trying to bridge that disconnect. But there's a lot of work that goes in. I know a lot of podcasters. I don't have my own show, but you're first of all, I mean, you're booking guests. Like, how are people coming to you? There's a time involvement in right there. You get the person on the phone at a mutually, I guess, a time that works for both of you, and then you're having your pre-chat like we did. You're going through the interview. You're having your post-chat. And it'd be nice if that's where it stopped, but no, that's really where the fun just starts, as you know, because what's going to happen is after you say you have a 30-minute show, what I'm usually recommend or I find is that 30 minutes of audio is going to take you about an hour and a half to edit really right. And when I say edit, that's going through the interview and taking out the pauses and the lip smacks and making sure the host and the guest volume, are similar, so you're not going to blow out the listener's eardrum and make it an enjoyable experience. There's things that come up during the course of an interview that are fun to take out: background noises, paper shuffling, dogs barking, sirens, all that fun things. So that adds up, and you're stopping to do your show notes while you're listening to the interview again if you're a host, and you have to write down your points because you're going to be promoting your show. So that could take an hour and a half. I try to warn people that part can be time consuming. You've got the body of the interview edited, then you've got to mix in your neat little intros and outros and transition sounds and bumpers and maybe you have sponsorship. You have to mix all that in to make sure that all fits together nicely. And then once you're done that, you're tagging or branding the file, you're shrinking down the MP3, and you're going into separate programs to do all this. So you may say, oh, okay, it only takes 5 minutes to tag a file, but or to do these things, but you add all these things up, they can be quite time consuming, and that's before you even upload it to the hosting site.
Well, and I was going to interrupt for one quick second, Matt, because something you said really struck an interesting chord, because you talked about taking about an hour and a half. Now, for me, it sounds like it would take an experienced person an hour and a half to do all that, because you've got a half hour of audio. You pretty much have to listen to the whole thing anyway, so that's a minimum of a half hour. Then if you're typing and writing and doing all your show notes and everything, so it would seem to me that an experienced person, it would take an hour and a half, and it would seem to me that if somebody was only doing it once a week for only their own show, and I say only just to mean limited to, limited to their own show, it could take 2 or 3 times as long. I mean, I know when I first started this, I remember how much extra time, when I first started doing video editing and all the other stuff this way, I know how much more time it took me than it does now. Now, isn't it fair to say that an inexperienced person or somebody who it's not their full-time job, it could take longer, 2, 3, or 4 times longer than an hour and a half for each half-hour podcast episode to get it right?
No, you're absolutely right. My time has been cut down just because I close my eyes at night. I see the editing software in my head because I'm doing it all day long, and you do get some that are a little bit harder to edit, and just because for a number of reasons, and it depends too on the host and the guest. A lot of times, the host, and the guest, once your experience might be a little bit quicker. But you are right. There are some, that I've been definitely I've been a lot longer on. So you're absolutely right. No two shows are the same, and some might stretch a little bit longer. And I usually try to recommend a host, if you can, to in my opinion, keep a podcast, the quick and a little bit shorter, and don't venture into, just in my opinion, those hour and plus shows that they could tend to drag on.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because, and you mentioned the hour plus shows. Here, just as a quick digression, here's what I found is the time of the show goes up exponentially by the number of guests or the number of people talking. It seems like if you keep a show to one guest, you can probably get it done in about a half hour. I mean, look at the way we do Expert Showcase. I mean, we do Experts Focus, we do Hero's Journey in one segment, Expert Focus in another. They're really their own they could be their own 2 little mini podcasts because they have their own subject matter. And they work well at a half hour with only one guest. But you look at something like SourceFed, who has 4 hosts on it. They fill an hour very, very quickly because they're all talking and everybody wants to talk and converse. So without, I guess the point there becomes, I think this also flows into understanding how much work, to wrap it back in there. Would you agree that if you want to have that your work is probably increased by the number of guests you plan to have on your podcast, either simultaneously or in a row on a given broadcast, or do you think that doesn't affect it at all?
No, I think you're right. You can't shortchange a guest. All the shows I work with, to be quite honest, are just a host and guest, or a host doing a little monologue or a solo show. So I haven't come across. I've listened to a few podcasts where they've had multiple guests in, and I think you want to give everyone a fair try. And I guess there's sometimes where a longer podcast works well is when you're driving in the car and you really have a subject that you're passionate about. If there's an hour and a half podcast, that's great because you're listening to it right straight out. So
Yeah.
just sometimes it could drag on and affect the listeners, I guess, attention span.
Epic. So before we get into the next bullet point, which is the importance of remaining consistent, is there anything else you want to leave our audience with today about understanding how much work is involved in doing a podcast?
Yeah, I think if you go in, expect how does that work? It's you expect the best but prepare for the worst. I think is kind of how it says because a lot of podcasters are passionate people, but I mean this is also they're doing this on the side. They have a full-time job and they've got lots of kids, things like that on the weekends. So that can really affect. You don't want your passion project to be something that's tied around your leg and pulling you down that you're dreading and things like that. So I think that my advice is just be realistic on what it's going to do. If you want to put out, whether you're doing it yourself or outsourcing it, just be realistic that there are quite a few steps involved to put out a quality product and yeah, know what's involved before committing to starting up.
Epic. And that kind of also leads us into the importance of remaining consistent because understanding what's involved is going to help you plan for consistency to make sure that you're consistent. And before I steal your thunder, because I just realized I was about to describe what this is about, why don't I turn it over to you
That's
because
okay.
it is your show and you're the
Oh no.
you're the important thing. So tell the folks why it's important to be consistent.
Well, I mean, like I was saying, there's some people where podcast is strictly a hobby if you're really passionate about something, and that's fine. Those people, I have a lot of respect for them. A lot of podcasters are using it, whether if they're in the coaching industry or personal development, they're using it really as a live or a recorded business card. So it's very important when you're using that podcast as your business card and people are signing up to subscribe to your feeds and get delivered your content to keep delivering. If it's a weekly show, if you're delivering them or releasing them on Monday, keep them up because people they'll get used to getting that. And I know there's a discussion, podcasts are evergreen and they stay online forever and that, but if this in my opinion is that once you build up that following, you lose a little bit of steam if you're releasing a show every 2 or 3 months. And I know it's hard because everybody's got stuff going on, but if you're going to be a weekly podcast, do your best to keep that weekly. And now there's things that you can do, and you're probably familiar with batching and being in the interview business. But the nice thing is with these programs, hosting sites and different things, if you can get a day where you can do 5, 6 interviews, say you do 6 interviews, you've got enough there. I guess I consider it, in the can. You have enough there to last you a month and a half. Get those, put them in the Dropbox for the editor, or set them aside for you to edit yourself, and get those all done up at once. So if you're going, say, on vacation, or you're going to have a busy time at maybe a day job, you know that's sitting there being set to be released from your, on the hosting site or on your website. So we have the technology now, so if you can focus and be consistent, you're not going to lose momentum on your brand. Because I read somewhere, I think there's, I don't know if anyone knows the exact number, there's somewhere around 250,000 podcasts, and I've read that up to 40% of them are actually dormant, they're inactive. And I think that goes back to, well, the point one, understanding how much work's involved. People start it, hey, this is fun, do 5 or 6 episodes maybe, and then don't monetize and say, wow, this is a lot of work, do I keep going? But then also, yeah, I mean, if 40% are inactive, that means there's an awful lot of podcasts that aren't being consistent and people losing momentum.
Well, and that really becomes the key. So when you're saying consistency, it sounds like there's really two types of consistencies. I'm gonna translate a little bit, at least what I picked up on. One type of consistency, because it's used as your business card, is consistency in your own message and you being consistent in the podcast, so that people hear the same thing over and over and over. I mean, you look at some radio DJs like Howard Stern. Once he got his format, he didn't deviate from his format while he was on the radio for umpteen years. It was always the shock jock. It was always, people knew what they were going to get. And it's funny, there's a scene in the movie Private Parts where they're looking at the ratings, and they're like, his ratings were up amongst people who liked him, and they said, why? And they said, well, they want to see what he's going to say next. And he said his ratings were up in the people who didn't like him. And then he said, why? And he said, because they want to see what he's going to say
Yeah,
next. So the whole point is he was consistent, and everybody kind of knew what they were going to get. The second
yeah,
and equally critical part of consistency you were bringing up is the consistency of show releasing, and making sure that if you commit to a weekly, you figure out a way to make it a weekly show. Just like Expert Showcase. Expert Showcase is released on a weekly basis, but we have seasons, so we'll take a break in between. Maybe the summer and the fall season, like other TV
that's
shows
smart.
do. But
Yeah,
then it's like, okay, fine. Here you go. Here's the next season. So is that
yeah,
what you were? Were those the two things you were talking
exactly.
about?
Yeah, if you're going to if you are busy, you're taking the summer off or something, maybe announce it, put out a blog post, let your network know, hey, we'll see you again in September. So you're not just leaving them hanging, wondering if you're still doing the podcast, if you stopped it, if that's a very good idea. But you're right, though. I think hosts a lot of times maybe need some time to recharge as well. So I think if you're smart about letting your people know you'll be back with new episodes October 1st, then I think that's the way to go about it.
So the other thing, and it's interesting because I do all the scheduling with Expert Showcase and other TV shows that we run, um, but I don't do a lot of scheduling with podcasts. So tell me, if is there a way that you can, if you have older episodes in the can, that you can make them fresh again, re-release them, like we do in TV, do a rerun, that sort of thing? I mean, is that a capability, um, or is it more manual where you're just downloading the episode and uploading it, and re-releasing it? And by the way, Matt, before you answer that, if you haven't had a client that's had to do it, it's okay to say
Oh
you
yeah.
haven't had a client that wants to do that.
Yeah, I've had actually I just had this week a client sent me some an episode and he said I can't even remember when we recorded this. I think I did it 2, 3 months ago. So I guess the issue there is you've got to really listen if they're talking about something time sensitive. If the U.S. election's gone by and they're making predictions on Trump being the next president, then I guess you got to kind of watch for that, or talking like a bit about events. But the nice part is a lot of this stuff is going right back to Napoleon Hill till today. It's all, now I don't want to use the word recycled, but it's all kind of something that could help. Well, look, Gary Vaynerchuk's book was written almost 7, 8 years ago, and it helped me just this year. So it's good if I encourage people not to, and I've mentioned this to a few people, if you have an interview from a few months ago, the quality is good, but it's you're saying, oh, gee, it's a few months old. Don't discount, like throw it in the trash. Maybe listen to it and see if it could still help someone, because that's content that you and your guests spent time to come up with. Don't waste it. That could keep you get you another podcast for another week. So yeah, that's a good question.
Thank you. And also in the vein of remaining consistent, consistently mention things and people in your podcast that are good for SEO, like Napoleon Hill, Trump.
Yeah.
I mean, you're epic, man. I got to get you. I mean, both you and Mark come on and give some great mentions for SEO. But that's a topic.
Toronto Blue Jays, got to give a shout out to our Canadian baseball team for sure. So
Hey, now wait a minute. I'm outside. I know you're in Canada. I'm outside Philadelphia. We still remember '93.
'93,
We're still
yeah,
kind of tweaking about '93, but that's okay. That's okay. If we were in
Mitch.
Colorado, we'd be happy. We'd be tweaking and we'd be happy. But anyway, that's besides the point completely. I think that's a natural segue, and at least I got a chance to take my breath for an hour, for my one breath an hour. Let's move into the importance of producing a quality product. That
Sure.
sounds so simple and so much like common sense. Um, but you'd be surprised at the people who don't do it. I'll tell you a quick funny story before I ask for what you really mean here. I had done something for a while that I thought was quality, and an app called Oddvisor reached out to me and said, "We want to give you a page." I'm on there with Seth Godin and Guy Kawasaki and Joel Comm and a lot of other big names. Now one of the world's top experts in the personal growth visionary field. Um, and I sent them the recording, and they basically told me it took them hours to try and clean it up, that they could never clean it up. And I'm like, well, I thought it was quality the whole entire time until I
Yeah.
actually listened to it. And then the funny part is I actually started checking some settings and realized, oh, what I thought was quality wasn't quality. So, I mean, that's kind of one of my experiences. But um, so I guess one of the things I want the audience to understand before we even go into quality, and that's why I brought it up, was the fact of you might think you're producing a quality product, but until you have a professional look at it, you might not know if you're not producing a quality product. Right,
Yeah.
Matt?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I recommend to people if they're editing themselves, after you finish editing or putting it together, your show, step away from the computer for a while, just clear your head, do whatever, come back, sit down, and don't have your well, close your eyes, put in your earbuds, and pretend you're a listener and listen to that episode as if, and don't look at the little editing software going across the screen. Just close your eyes and say, okay, if I was listening to this podcast, is it blowing my eardrums out? Is the host and guest consistent? Is the music mixed right? Are the everything needs to be done. So I guess that goes whether you're doing it yourself or outsourcing it. Try to not just look at price, because I've run into a couple cases already where someone said, well, I'm not going to pay you this, but I found someone off a popular, and I don't want to run down freelancers because they're great and I've used them for certain tasks. But if someone online says that they can do a full edit of your episode for $5 and they can do a 30 minutes in 45 minutes, odds are that's probably, that's, I would say, not possible to do the best job possible in 45 minutes. So I think, and also look into see if there's hidden charges, because I've had clients run into, okay, well, I got a basic edit for $10, but then I went to mix it, there's an extra $5, and to do show notes was an extra $5, to upload it was an extra $5, and so just kind of see what's involved. And again, I used some freelancing sites. It's a great development that's come along online, but just make sure that if you want to put out a quality product just to save a dollar or two, it's really not worth it in the long run.
Yeah, well, and so the first reason to put out, or the first thing is that people might not know that their product isn't of high quality. But why is it so important to produce the highest quality product possible? I mean, it's just a podcast. It's just, I'll say it's just a podcast, right? I mean, why is it so important to produce as high a quality product as possible?
Well, it's for the listener, really. Like, you want those listeners to subscribe to your feed and to listen to get what you're saying, to listen from the start to the finish. So the problem is if you're not normalizing the volume, or if you're not matching volumes, or making sure, that it's a pleasant listening experience, someone's not going to listen to it again. They're going to pull their earbuds out and say, this is a mess, and they're probably not going to recommend your podcast to somebody else. So I think it's just important to, like I say, look at it as if you're a listener, close your eyes, listen to it, without coming at it from a bias, and say, if I was a listener, would I enjoy this, and would I subscribe to it, and would I recommend it to my friends? So, and have your friends and family listen to it too, and have them be brutally honest. Say, hey, anything you noticed with that, could be volume, could be background. Now, not all background noise can be taken out. It's kind of sometimes the editor has to or the person editing has to do the best they can with what they have, but just do the best, because you're putting all that work into your podcast. You want it to sound as good as possible.
And I think you really hit on the golden nugget there. A lot of times we think, especially we in the personal growth industry, think that if we just give people great information, great content, that they're always gonna recommend us. But there's a psychology behind why you recommend somebody. It's not only the quality of the content, but the experience that somebody enjoys. And if they enjoy a better experience while listening, they're more apt to refer you to their friends and family, right, Matt?
Exactly. No, you're absolutely right. You only get one chance to make a first impression. So if that person, if they're not a raving fan, they're not a member of your tribe, they're tuning into you for the first time, you want to knock it out of the park with them, and then they're gonna not only check out your podcast, or most likely you're gonna check out your page and your course offerings and the other things that you could do for them. So it's a circle. It comes full circle, and they're all connected.
Yeah, that is epic. And um, before I was just thinking of something, but without derailing us anymore, before we wrap up the expert focus, I'm gonna give people your website in a second. I'm gonna tell them they need to get in touch with you, and they need to really do business with you because they do to make their shows more epic. Before I get to all that, is there anything last you want to leave with our viewers today about podcasting, about personal service,
Sure.
about all this stuff that we've talked about?
Yeah, a few things, Chris, and I should have mentioned it on the consistent thing when I touched on you don't want the podcast to be a chore and start to hate your passion. There's been some people I know that said, I want to jump in with a daily show and I'm going to knock the socks off everyone. I'd recommend start with the weekly show first, get your feet under you, see what's involved, and then, if you say, hey, okay, I'm really liking this, getting good results, I'm getting lots of guests, then ramp it up to a daily show if you have the means to do that. So start that way instead of saying going gangbusters out the gate. Now I'm saying this. My brother started with a 7-day show, but he's a different breed. He went from 7, then he thought it was a major downscale to go to 5 days a week. The guy's a machine, but for
Yeah.
podcasting, I think you really have to just go. Well, I guess it goes back to the first point: understand what's involved, and yeah, definitely. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Kind of dip your toe in, get your feet under you, and you'll get better. I've said this before. Your second interview will be better than your first. Your third interview will be better than your second, and then before you know it, you're going to have 100 shows under your belt, and people are going to be coming to you to ask for help. So.
Epic. Well, Matt, you've been an epic guest today. I'm going to throw up your website, podassist.com, folks. If you've got a podcast, or if you're thinking about a podcast, you've got to reach out to Matt. And I say if you're thinking about it because you're going to want to get this guy in on the ground floor on what you're doing, because he's going to help save you the time. I mean, if you're going to have to spend a couple of bucks on something in your podcast, you got to spend it on Matt and his services at Podassist, because it's going to make you better. It's going to, in my opinion, it's going to accelerate your growth, and it's going to get you to where you want faster. It's going to reduce your stress and reduce your frustration. And one of the things I love about Matt is the hands-on service the hands-on personal service that he gives all his clients. I mean, it's what this guy loves to do. He loves to be in the personal growth and development industry, and he does an epic job. I've heard a lot of his work. It's amazing. It's amazing to hear the before and after when Matt gets his hands on a podcast episode. Once again, it's podassist.com. If like I said, if you got a podcast, reach out to Matt. Go there today. Set up an appointment. Set up a consultation. Just get in touch with the guy. Just do it. Whatever he tells you to do, just do it. Matt, can you help me? Yes, I can. Good. You got to help me. So you got to go out there today. Visit podassist.com. Make it a point to do it today. Make it a point to come back and enjoy the next episode of Expert Showcase. And until we meet again, make it an epic day.